In 2007, Nokia sold more phones than every other company on Earth combined. It controlled roughly 40% of the entire global mobile phone market. It was Europe's most valuable company. Analysts called it unbeatable. And in just 6 years, it collapsed so completely that its phone business was sold off for scraps, bought by Microsoft for a price that barely covered what Nokia had spent building its brand. This is the story of how the biggest company in mobile phone history looked directly at the future and chose to ignore it. Nokia didn't start as a phone company at all. Founded in Finland in 1865, it began as a pulp mill on the banks of a river. Over the next century, it moved through rubber boots, cables, and electronics, before finally settling on telecommunications in the 1990s. That willingness to reinvent itself again and again is exactly what made Nokia so dominant when mobile phones exploded into the mainstream. While competitors were still making bulky, unreliable devices, Nokia built phones that were simple, durable, and, for the time, genuinely fun to use. The Nokia 3310 became one of the best-selling electronics products ever made, practically indestructible, instantly recognizable by its ringtone alone. By the mid-2000s, Nokia wasn't just a phone maker. It was the phone maker. It employed engineers who filed groundbreaking patents. It had one of the most efficient manufacturing and supply chains in the world, capable of producing hundreds of millions of handsets a year at astonishing speed and low cost. It even had early smartphone-like devices years before most competitors, running its own operating system called Symbian. On paper, Nokia had every advantage a company could ask for: money, talent, market share, brand loyalty, and a head start on mobile software. Then, on January 9, 2007, Steve Jobs walked onto a stage in San Francisco and introduced the iPhone. Inside Nokia, the reaction wasn't panic. It was something arguably worse: dismissal. Executives reportedly looked at the iPhone's battery life, its lack of a physical keyboard, and its high price, and concluded it wasn't a serious threat to their business. Nokia had seen countless competitors come and go. Why would this be different? What Nokia's leadership underestimated wasn't the phone itself. It was the platform. The iPhone wasn't just a device. It was the beginning of an entirely new relationship between people and software, built around touchscreens and app stores, and Nokia's engineering culture, built for hardware, not for that kind of software ecosystem, struggled to adapt. Symbian, Nokia's operating system, had been designed for an era of physical buttons and simple menus. Retrofitting it to compete with a fully touchscreen, app-driven experience turned out to be far harder than anyone at Nokia expected. Updates were slow. The software felt clunky next to Apple's smooth interface. Developers who were flocking to build apps for the iPhone found Symbian frustrating to work with and increasingly avoided it. Nokia was trying to renovate a house while a competitor built something entirely new next door. Meanwhile, another threat was rising from a different direction entirely. In 2008, Google released Android, a free, flexible operating system that any phone manufacturer could use. Suddenly, companies like Samsung and HTC didn't need to build their own software from scratch. They could adopt Android, focus on hardware, and compete directly with both Apple and Nokia at the same time. Nokia now found itself squeezed from two sides: Apple's premium ecosystem above, and a wave of affordable Android phones below. Internally, Nokia knew something was wrong. But knowing and acting are very different things inside a company that size. Different divisions disagreed on strategy. Some engineers pushed to abandon Symbian entirely and build something new. Others believed doubling down and improving what they had was the safer bet. Meetings dragged on. Decisions got delayed, revisited, and delayed again. Meanwhile, Apple was shipping a new iPhone every year, each one faster and more polished than the last. and Android manufacturers were flooding the market with cheaper alternatives that still felt modern. Big companies rarely fail because nobody sees the danger coming. They fail because the organization can't move fast enough to respond to it. Nokia had thousands of employees, an enormous existing product line, carrier relationships across the globe, and a reputation to protect. All of that, which had once been Nokia's greatest strength, became the very weight that slowed it down. In 2010, Nokia brought in a new CEO from Microsoft named Stephen Elop, hoping outside leadership could turn the company around. In February 2011, Elop wrote an internal memo that would later leak to the public, comparing Nokia to a man standing on a burning oil platform, forced to make a desperate leap into freezing water just to survive. It became known as the Burning Platform Memo, and it was brutally honest about how much trouble Nokia was really in. Elop's solution was to abandon Symbian and partner with his former employer, adopting Microsoft's Windows Phone as Nokia's new operating system. It was a bold pivot, but it came far too late, and it placed Nokia's future in the hands of a platform that, at the time, had barely any market share or developer support of its own. Nokia essentially traded one struggling ecosystem for another. Sales continued to slide. Market share that had once seemed unshakable evaporated within a few short years. By 2013, the company that had defined an entire generation of mobile phones agreed to sell its devices and services business to Microsoft for roughly $7 billion, a fraction of what Nokia's mobile division had once been worth at its peak. Microsoft's own attempt to revive the brand later failed as well, and within a few more years, the Windows Phone platform was discontinued entirely. Nokia itself didn't disappear. Freed from its struggling phone business, the company shifted toward telecommunications infrastructure and networking equipment, quietly rebuilding itself into a very different kind of business. But the Nokia that once sat in nearly every pocket on the planet, the company synonymous with mobile phone itself, was gone. What happened to Nokia wasn't a single mistake. It was a company built for one era, failing to recognize that the era itself had already changed, and discovering too late that being the biggest company in the room means nothing if you're solving yesterday's problem. The world doesn't wait for anyone to catch up, and neither does this channel.